Coogs House. We've had Houston Cougar basketball to break down. First real game of the season is Monday night, but we're not waiting until then to talk about it.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate making sure you first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. When join the conversation, but I would say, tell us in the comments down below what your favorite drama on TV is. I mentioned in the football show that came out earlier today that I'm a big Sopranos and mob shows kind of guy as far as the dramas go, although I would stress that Sopranos feels like a comedy at times. But tell us what yours is in the comments down below. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about the backcourt of the Houston Cougars. Now, I want to talk about the full thing and how there might be too many mouths to feed. I want to make sure we understand what I mean by that, but going through the guys that are coming off the bench for depth, as well as the three guys that start the Houston Cougars given the A&M exhibition game. So that's where we're going to start in this one. Now, Houston has kind of, for a long time now, had multiple three guards as opposed to two guards and two forwards. They've had three guards and oftentimes two forwards and no traditional center, right? And so this year, while we've got JBR is mostly a traditional center, although I would say that he has some things defensively that make him more like a forward. We're doing the three guard, two forward thing, I think, most officially on the books, right? And the three guards we're starting as after the A&M exhibition game. This is not a surprise to anyone, but Milos Uzan, LJ Cryer, and Emanuel Sharp. LJ and Emanuel both being returning starters, obviously, in the backcourt. And what's interesting is looking at how these three guys complement each other so well. And obviously, the big exodus here is losing Jamal Shead. I think the telecasts, I didn't have it on volume high the whole time, but I feel like I probably said it 20 times, right? Like, you're going to hear it every single game, a couple times a game. Jamal's out tearing it up in Toronto with the Raptors, doing a great job. Representing the school well, for what it's worth. But you're also looking at a group that might actually be gels together better. That's not to say that Jamal's not a crazy good basketball player and an incredibly valuable piece. He was best player in the Big 12 last year, right? But what I'm trying to say more so is that Jamal was a downhill attack to score kind of guy, and did a lot of his assisting kind of in drops around the rim, right? So what I mean by that is he drives the basket and he'd find a big guy, Roberts, Francis, Tugler, whomever, right? Jarris Walker the year before, right? Whomever. Reggie Chaney and rest in peace, but you also had Josh Carlson. Like, all of these guys on the rim were catching drop-offs from Jamal. This group, Milos, LJ, Emanuel, intentionally, unintentionally, felt like they were looking to drive and kick out to the three-point line. And they were driving and kicking. Posts were kicking out as well. And that is interesting to see, especially coming out of Milos, who didn't shoot the ball from behind the arc very well in this game, was 1 of 3 back there. And frankly, the one that went in, I kind of thought, 1 of 3 from three-point line. I think it's interesting, though, that with LJ and Sharp, you truly have two guys that on any given night could go like 4 of 5 or 6 of 8 from 3. And that's not even getting into the bench guys. Just in that starting unit alone, you've truly got those two guys. And then Milos, I think, is a capable three-point shooter. He's also a bigger body. It's interesting, as a true point guard, he's also the biggest of the three guys as far as like height and length goes. I think Sharp's probably stronger in the weight room. He's got some more muscle to him. But and so looking at the way that they attack to kick as opposed to drop. And that plays into one another because they can all shoot from outside, right? And they're pretty good shooters. This is as good a shooting backcourt as I've had in a minute. And we'll talk about that when we get to the depth part as well. But this is a really good shooting backcourt team. And it's going to be nice. It's going to be nice. The other thing, though, is that defensively, so again, I coach high school basketball. You talk to your big guys, you're scouting about what teams do when they drive. Some teams are really good floaters teams. Some teams fight through contact. Some teams pull up for the midi. Each of these guys, Milos, LJ, and Emanuel, is dramatically different in what they do well when they get inside of 10 feet, right? Milos has a nice floater, but is frankly trying to pass the ball a lot more often, right? LJ has his big floater, but he also has a great little pivot fadeaway. Emanuel Sharp has the same kind of pivot fadeaway, but is also probably the most, and admittedly, Milos is playing with a broken nose. But in the A&M game, and then in the last 2 years, I've gotten to watch Emanuel play, he's become the most, he seems to like it the most, attacking through contact. I mean, he'll get both his feet under him, either jump stop or gathering his feet, and then explode upwards through your contact. And as a big man, this is a split decision or split second decision you're making, okay? Am I going to close out on the floater and then take the and one foul on Emanuel Sharp? Am I going to close out on the floater and get shot faked and spun around by LJ Cryer? Am I going to, come out on the floater and then completely miss the guy, the point guard, dropping the ball, passing the ball off, right? Each of these guys attacks with a little bit different weapons. Now, Milos's floater, I think, is different in LJ's in that Milos appeared to get closer to the rim, both in his Oklahoma film and in his exhibition with A&M the other day. He wants to get closer to him. He's a little bit taller, too, though, taller, longer, etc. Cryer's able to hit this floater thing from 12 and 13 and 14 feet, which I get is a necessity at his size, but it's also if you're not a basketball guy, wicked hard, right? That's whoa, that was bad. I'm good. You good? I'm good. You good? Okay. It's wicked hard to do though. And it's really, really impressive that he's able to do that so fluidly, right? And so it's an impressive trio. And what's funny is I think they'll probably be the three highest scorers on the team. I was surprised to see that Milos had the second most shots on the team on Sunday. But it also felt like the ball moved so much more this year than really the last 5 or 6 years of Houston Cougar basketball, even Final Four year 2021, even Marcus Sasser and those guys are one team in the country, even last year with point guard Jamal Shed. The ball seemed to move. So we say it in our program, between dribbles, meaning I dribble, pass, third guy dribbles, right? Passing between dribbles, I think, is happening at a much higher rate with this team, and that implies movement, speed. You're working through cuts, working through things, whatever, right? And I think that also speaks to the fact that you've kind of got guys like LG's going to play some point. He's growing into that role some, right? Emmanuel's had to have some of this load. He came in off the bench as the first guard off the bench as a freshman. He's now a junior and a much bigger part of what's happening, right? He can't just be the young guy anymore. He's a leader on this team, right? And then Milos is a true point guard, right? That's how he plays the game. And so these guys are really doing a good job of distributing and passing the ball as well. The true strength of this team, though, is really going to end up being the bench unit. And I say that because previous years, someone's always gotten hurt. And obviously was Jamal Shed's ankle in the Sweet 16 last year that ultimately ended Houston season. But it's Sasser's groin, it's Tremont Mark's back, it's whatever, right? And Tremont Mark's shoulder, I should say. And it's upper back, whatever. The depth in this roster makes me think that while you don't want any of that to happen, I feel like the workload on each guy will be a little bit less. And I think that can help bring out the best of this roster. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about a new company to keep an eye on out there, and that is our buddies over at Roy. Return on You. It's time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week from the football season. That is AJ Halsey. AJ Halsey is getting $100 in his NIL account this weekend. I'll explain a little bit. So far this season, Roy has pulled over 20,000 players, $20,000 to support players on Roy. It's micro deposits that are leaving a massive change with the Roy app. You can direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring all the funds go directly to those players. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where support's going. And you can even receive exclusive content straight to your phone and all that, wherever you get your podcast and those kinds of things through all kinds of different fun stuff they can send out to you, right? It's risk free. If the athlete transfers, doesn't deliver on the content or whatever, you can get your money back. This week, again, AJ Halsey is the player of the week. So he got an extra $100 thrown into his account. I'd love you to join me. Throw him $10. Jack Martin for making the field goal. If you think up front, Demetrius Hunter and those guys, if you're thinking, I don't know, Joseph Manjack for the touchdown catch, Zion Curse for throwing it, Rashawn Sanford for running it, whatever you want to do, go to Roy and pay today, celebrate tomorrow. This actually adds up to success for the Houston Cougars. Make sure you're paying attention. Don't miss out on the Roy's exciting giveaway either. They got 2 tickets given away to a game in November. Download Roy, create an account, use the referral code Locked On, and just like that, you're entered. If you're already on Roy, any contribution to an athlete's campaign also gets you entered automatically. No purchase necessary, void or prohibited. Download Roy, join the NIL game with no subscriptions, no fees. Be sure you follow them on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Roy_return on you for more info. Roy, sports players, change the game. Parker, enter Locked On Cougs here, and we're talking about the depth in this Houston Cougar roster. And I really think that that's a true strength of this backcourt, especially when you realize like how many different kinds of offensive configurations you can pull out of this, and they all have tremendous defensive upside, right? So as far as returners go, right, returners that played last year, you got Malik Wilson, Terrence Arsenault is back, and he'll play some wing, and then Ramon Walker, who plays some 3 as well. Now, each of these guys is Malik, Terrence, and Ramon are kind of multi-positional, right? Malik can play a little point guard, play a little 2 guard. Terrence can play a little 2 guard, little 3 guard, little small ball 4. Ramon can kind of do the 3 and kind of do the small ball 4 thing because of his just intensity. He's not very big, but he plays a lot bigger than he is, right? And so each of those guys offer those kinds of things defensively. But Terrence, we saw, has clearly continued to expand and grow his game. I'm going to keep beating this drum until someone tells me to stop. Hopefully it's not like an HOA person or something like that. But Terrence is playing like a future pro. And whether it's the shooting, the defense, the length, he was doing it before he got hurt last year. He did an exhibition game. I can see it unfolding as him playing himself into that role. For what it's worth, people don't remember, there were draft scouts and analysts that had him as a late second round pick, but a second round pick after a freshman year in which he was the 7th or 8th guy off the bench. It was all based on potential, but multi-positional versatility, the length, the intensity, the intangibles, and then obviously he's growing into quite an offensive player as well. I thought it was interesting when Malik Wilson came in. He kind of spelled both LJ Cryer and Milos Uzan at different points. And it was interesting to me that whenever he did that, whereas Malik was the backup point guard in stretches of the season last year, and I don't think that role initially fit him the best, he kind of split that job with the other of those 2 starting guards. So when he came in for Milos, it wasn't that he was replacing him and becoming the point guard. He shared that duty with LJ, and LJ looked a little more comfortable than he did a year ago. Now, LJ's going to have to continue to grow into that as he continues to play at the higher and higher levels. Obviously, that's going to be the more natural position for him. I don't think you're getting into kind of positionless basketball across the world here. I still think that someone's going to look for a point guard. But Malik sharing that job with him, I think, worked really well. I also think it kind of kept A&M off focus as to where things are starting from, right? It's easy to think of LJ as an off-the-ball movement shooter because he's really good at that. But when he's got the ball in his hands, start the offense, it kind of throws off what your coverage is as defense, right? Ramon's toughness, Terrence's toughness both play a big role in this. But when they're playing the small forward spot, Houston feels a lot bigger all of a sudden. When they're playing that 3, that third guard, Terrence or Ramon, that means you have at least 2 real bigs in the game. And suddenly Houston feels like a really big basketball team while still having the footwork, versatility, etc., to play an up-tempo defense, even if they're going to continue to slow it down on offense. The guys that didn't play last year but are on the team this year, they're going to play a big role here, obviously, are Mercy Miller, star of the show on Sunday. We'll talk more about him in a second. And Cordell Jefferson. I was really high on Cordell coming out of high school, and I still am very high on his potential. I don't mean to say that negatively, I shouldn't say. We found out going into his freshman year that he'd played a long time with 2 broken wrists, got those fixed up and healed, spent a year getting a lot bigger, and this dude is looking like a strong safety linebacker type guy through his chest and shoulders. He's all kinds of jacked up. Credit to Allen Bishop for that one. And he is he did not play a whole lot of minutes on Sunday. I think I got him down here with 7 minutes in the box score. He plays with a crazy fire and intensity. And I think that's what attracted me to Cordell's game out of high school was he played at Arlington Martin up in DFW. And it's not that they're ever bad at basketball. Sometimes it's that they're not they're not Duncanvilles and whatever. And it's not that he turned them into one of those, but he made them competitive in a way that, they took some of those teams to the brink. Because he's that intense, a competitive kind of guy. As far as his offense goes, I'm sure all of his jump shooting mechanics had to get thrown. I mean, the wrist thing had to be awful, right? He was a streaky shooter in high school, projected to be that kind of thing where if he's hot, he's hot. And, you kind of grow into being a more routine shooter over the course of your college career. The trick is that he does a lot of things well that other people on this roster also do well. And so fitting him into minutes here or minutes there, he's a true depth piece. If, Milos is in foul trouble, Wilson's in foul trouble, he can get in the game and how about some there. He's more of a true point guard than I think Mercy is personally. And so I think there is a little bit quicker path in that sense. I just think there's a lot of guys with duplicate skills. And so he's kind of a depth piece right now that honestly will, be working guys' tails to make sure that they develop at practice. We heard from Sampson, was it 2 years ago? What year was the Malik Wilson redshirt? Was that 2 years ago? That Malik's job at practice, and he was admittedly redshirting, so it's a little different. He knew he wasn't going to play, but was like, hey, this Terrence kid is going to be something. Your job is to work him. Right? Cordell can do that parts. I mean, he can do that part. And I think he will find a role in this team in the long run. And the short run, it's about being that depth piece that's always ready to go, right? Stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. And Cordell's got that part down. The star of the show on Saturday for a lot of people watching that watch a lot of offensive basketball, though, was Mercy Miller. Offense is fun to watch. I get it. Had a couple dunks. He had a couple freshman moments too. Turnover here and that kind of stuff. Missed rotation defense, several missed rotations on defense. But on a whole, for a kid that was like going to prom 4 months ago, Mercy Miller looked really, really good. 14 minutes, 11 points, a couple great cuts off the ball, great pass that said a lot in the break. Really, really just looks ready to play Division I high level basketball already, right? Now, at a lot of programs, and this is the case with Cordell too, at a lot of programs, he'd be getting a chunk of minutes, like a lot of minutes. Cordell would be getting a lot of minutes. Malik Wilson would be getting a lot at a lot of programs. At this program, as Houston's number 4 nationally right now, and I'd argue they should be higher, it's just that many guys in the backcourt. And so where they fit in, I think where Mercy fits in maybe quicker than Cordell is, you can get a bucket out of Mercy quickly. So if you can find a way to cover him up on defense and you're struggling to score, it's not Emanuel Sharp stay shooting the ball or whatever. Mercy is good size, long arms, comes in and scores right away. It's coming, and get to the foul line, and get to the rim. Hit a great baseline, fall away in the exhibition game as well. What you saw him doing his high school stuff, but he's already able to do that with college defenders. And A&M is not a slouchy defensive team. They might be a little overranked at 13 in the nation, but they are not a slouchy defensive team. Buzz Williams would not let them be, right? I don't know if I consider Chase McCarty a forward and a four, so like a small ball four sense or a guard. Um, if he's gonna end up playing more guard stuff this year, I almost think from a depth perspective, he has to redshirt, just because it's just so few minutes out there for him right now. And freshmen have troubled adjusting to the expectations of a Samson defense. And truthfully, that might be best for him long term, right? Now, I don't know that if he's going to be a small ball four. That might be a quicker path to the floor. Um, you know, with Terrence and Ramon on the floor, though, I don't know where that fits in. And so Chase, while he earned every bit of his top whatever ranking in high school, I think it was top 60 or maybe it was top 80, played at an elite level high school basketball program at IMG, is very much a college ready player, much like Cordell and Mercy. There's a lot of Big 12 caliber teams that he would be at least in the top 6, 7 rotation in, let alone starting it, a couple of these ones. And he's just on a team right now that's just loaded. And so we're going to knock on wood and hope no one gets hurt, obviously, because that would be the worst way to see this depth tested. But truthfully, I hope that there's a game with tightly called fouls, goes double overtime, feels like that A&M game last year in the tournament. And I want to see this depth get tested. And if it happens in Vegas, the NIL thing or whatever, I think it's been important to see how that plays out. Now, I want to talk about the downside of having all this depth, having too many mouths to feed in 1 second. But first, got to tell you about it over at FanDuel, because FanDuel is bringing you this episode today. It's also America's #1 sports book, and right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook gives you everything you need in one place. Bet live bets on the NFL. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game. You can check out the latest stats, view play-by-play, and so much more. On the same page, you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com today and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment worth FanDuel. Visit Sportsbook partner of the NFL. Park Ranger with Locked On Cougs here, breaking down Houston Cougar basketball. Look at the backcourt today. And honestly, I think the biggest problem you're going to see, and this come with the front court too, we do it later, is this problem where they're like, are there too many mouths to feed? In this episode alone, we've listed, 9 guys that count as backcourt players that could all play. And I can tell you right now, I'm not going to diminish some other Big 12 program by saying you would take our last guy off the bench, but all 9 guys would be in the top 7 rotation at other Big 12 schools, let alone other Division I programs that will make the NCAA tournament, right? They're that kind of deep. It'll be interesting to see how you go through a game where LJ and Emanuel, to some degree, Terrence and Mercy, Milos, again, is going to get some shots up, apparently. All these guys need to get shots up because you've also got to get JV Airheads. You got to set him up. You got to set up JoJo. You got to set up J1 some. And yes, they're going to get putbacks and those kind of stuff because that's a big focus of what they do. But like Jacob McFarland's going to need some setup if he's going to get in the game. Seth Lott's going to need some of that as well. And so I almost wonder if there'll be stretches where Houston kind of defaults to a stretch 4 with Terrence or Ramon, or maybe even Chase McCarty, just because it's almost easier to fit them in there, right? It's just an easier play. I don't know. I think that ultimately this basketball team has a lot of talent, and that I don't think that Houston doesn't recruit the high ego guys that are going to be like, I need more shots. I need more shots. I don't think they're going to have those guys in the roster. It's not that'd be a surprise if a Samson team had that, right? But I do think that in looking at this, that there'll be games where, let's say there's a close one in Fog Allen in Kansas. That last year they lost 4 games or whatever it was, right? So they're going to lose games. No one goes undefeated. Let's say they lose a close one, and Mercy was 3 of 3. The criticism is going to be, well, Mercy should have gotten more shots off, right? Or let's say they lose a close one and Emanuel Sharp is 1 of 7. The question is going to be, well, why didn't someone come in for Emmanuel? Because he was 1 of 7, right? Now, those 2 games, actually, Mercy going 3 for 3 could happen quite often. Emmanuel being 1 of 7 is not going to happen very often. And frankly, I'm not, while I have questions about what Samson does sometimes, it's more inquisitive. It's more like, I just want to know. I never questioned it from like a, this is not right kind of way by any stretch. But making those decisions, who gets on the floor when, who gets fed when in that sense, is going to be important. And frankly, that's the jigsaw puzzle that Samson has to put together, and putting it together makes him a Hall of Fame, a future Hall of Fame coach in this sport, right? And so I don't envy that decision. I do like that it's that decision though, and not how do we manufacture points. That doesn't seem like the problem at all, right? I do like across the board here in this though, that while we're talking about how do we get these guys the appropriate amount of shots on offense or whatever, right? That while Mercy and then Cordell and Chase will make freshman mistakes defensively, they're just freshman mistakes. They're not unforgivable or anything like that. On the whole, all 9 of these guys can play defense. All 9 of these guys can really flat defend. And again, freshman mistakes happen, young guy mistakes happen, and even the best defenders in the world don't make 0 mistakes. But as I look at this 9 guys, this crazy deep backcourt Houston's got, I feel comfortable knowing that by January, when they're playing January basketball, because Samson's big on playing the correct basketball in the correct month. By the time they get to January, they're playing January basketball, Big 12 time. These guys will be defending at a very high level. And I wonder if the pace of play is going to stay as slow as it was in the A&M game. I was shocked that it was as low. The pace, number of possessions were as low as it was. I do think that we're going to feel all right about this one. And I think the guys are good. I'm excited about basketball season. I'm going to do front court later this week, so be on the lookout for that as well. Looking to get to talk to some people to preview the opener. More on that throughout the week and into the weekend. Locked On Coogs, the primary Locked On Podcast Network. If you look for a second list of the day, go check our buddies Andy and Isaac out at Locked On College Basketball. If you want to check out their Monday episode, they might even talk about Houston and hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Locked On Coogs, getting primary Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Go Coogs.